capital punishment, is a legal penalty in the U.S. state of Florida. Since 1976, the state has executed 99 convicted murderers, all at Florida State Prison. Since March 2017, when the prosecution pursues the death penalty, the sentence is decided by the jury and must be unanimous. In case of a hung jury during the penalty phase of the trial, a life sentence is issued. Even if a single juror opposed death, there is no retrial. Prior to 2014, the judge decided the sentence alone, and the jury gave only a non-binding advice. In March 2014, the Florida legislature provided a 10-juror supermajority to issue a sentence of death. This was also challenged, and in October 2014, the Florida Supreme Court struck down the law, finding that death sentences can only be handed down by a unanimous jury. In Florida, murder can be punished by death if it involves one of the next aggravating factors. It was committed by a person previously convicted of a felony and under sentence of imprisonment, placed on community control, or on felony probation. The defendant was previously convicted of another capital felony or of a felony involving the use or threat of violence to the person. The defendant knowingly created a great risk of death to many persons. It was committed while the defendant was engaged, or was an accomplice, in the commission of, or an attempt to commit a specified felony, such as aggravated child abuse, arson, kidnapping, placing or discharging of a destructive device or bomb. It was committed for the purpose of avoiding or preventing a lawful arrest or effecting an escape from custody. It was committed for pecuniary gain. It was committed to disrupt or hinder the lawful exercise of any governmental function or the enforcement of laws. It was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. It was committed in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner without any pretense of moral or legal justification. The victim was a law enforcement officer engaged in the performance of his or her official duties. The victim was an elected or appointed public official engaged in the performance of his or her official duties if the motive for the capital felony was related, in whole or in part, to the victim's official capacity. The victim was a person less than 12 years of age. The victim was particularly vulnerable due to advanced age or disability, or because the defendant stood in a position of familial or custodial authority over the victim. It was committed by a criminal gang member. It was committed by a person currently or formerly designated as a sexual predator. It was committed by a person subject to a restrictive order or a foreign protection order, and was committed against the person who obtained the injunction or protection order or any spouse, child, sibling, or parent of this person. Florida statute also provides the death penalty for capital drug trafficking and discharging or using a destructive device causing death. A provision for capital sexual battery was found unconstitutional in the 2008 U.S. Supreme Court case Kennedy v. Louisiana. No one is on death row in the United States for drug trafficking. As of July 8, 2021, 327 offenders are awaiting execution in Florida. Amongst these are 3 women currently on Florida death row. These are their names and crime committed. Tiffany Cole. She was born December 3, 1981, in South Carolina. In early July 2005, Tiffany Cole, Michael Jackson, and 2 other men, Alan Wade and Bruce Nixon, drove to the Sumners' home. The Sumners were a former neighbor of Tiffany. The Sumners in many occasions helped Tiffany financially. When Tiffany pickpointed the Sumners' house to her crime mates, Wade and Nixon went to the door and asked to use the phone. Once inside, Wade and Nixon attacked. The Sumners were bound and gagged with duct tape, put into the trunk of their Lincoln Town car, and driven across the border to a remote part of Georgia. Tiffany Cole and Jackson traveled separately in their car, planning to get deliberately pulled over for speeding if the police got too close to the Lincoln. Once in Georgia, the Sumners were forced to reveal the personal identification numbers of their bank accounts. The couple, blindfolded and bound, was pushed into a pre-dug grave and buried alive by Wade and Nixon. Tiffany Cole subsequently pawned jewelry and other items stolen from the Sumners' home, and the ATM card was used to obtain more than $1,000 in cash. 3 of the group were tracked back to a hotel in South Carolina by the use of the ATM card and arrested there. After being arrested, Nixon willingly led police to the Sumners' grave, revealing that both victims had managed to free themselves of their bonds, but could only manage to hug each other in their final moments before they died. At Tiffany Cole's week-long trial in October 2007, the jury deliberated for less than 90 minutes before finding her guilty of first-degree murder. They voted 9-3 that she should receive the death penalty. Evidence included photos of Tiffany Cole and 2 co-defendants in a limousine, celebrating with champagne and handfuls of cash. In 2010, Cole's petition to the United States Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari was denied. In 2017, the Florida Supreme Court ordered new sentencing hearings for Cole, Wade, and Jackson, because their juries had not unanimously recommended the death penalty. A 2016 U.S. Supreme Court ruling, Hurst v. Florida, found that Florida's prior law permitting non-unanimous jury verdicts in death penalty cases violated the Sixth Amendment, prompting Florida to resentence more than 150 convicted felons. In June 2022, Wade was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. As of February 2023, Tiffany Allen Cole has spent more than 14 years, 11 months on Florida's death row. Margaret Allen, born on January 23, 1966. In February 12, 2005, a housekeeper in Brevard County had household chemicals, including bleach, poured down her throat, was strangled and then buried in a shallow grave over some missing money. Titusville police received information that a body was buried in an unmarked grave somewhere off State Road 46. When investigators began questioning people, they learned that Wenda Wright, who was a housekeeper for Margaret Allen at 415 South Robbins Avenue, had allegedly been killed in the house and transported to some nearby woods. Chemicals were poured into her mouth. Duct tape was placed over her mouth, so this was not a fast death. It was a tortuous death, unfortunately. Allen told investigators that she killed Wright because she thought Wright had stolen her purse containing $2,000. When Wright would not admit to taking the purse, Allen became enraged and started beating Wright. Allen's son, Quentin, helped hold the woman down as Margaret Allen allegedly poured chemicals down her throat. Margaret Allen and son then allegedly strangled her with a belt. After questioning Quentin Allen, he reportedly revealed to police the approximate location of Wright's body. James Martin was also arrested and charged with accessory after the fact. It is believed that Martin helped bring Wright's body out to a remote area. All 3 were arrested and transported to the Brevard County Jail. Margaret Allen and Quentin Allen are both charged with first-degree murder and false imprisonment. Margaret Ann Allen was sentenced to death in Brevard County on May 19, 2011. Her crime was the torture and killing of her housekeeper, Wenda Wright, whom Allen suspected of stealing from her. According to the prosecutors, she tortured Wenda Wright for hours before strangling her with a belt. Margaret Allen received help from her roommate, James Martin, and Quentin Allen, to bury the victim in a shallow grave. The two were also convicted for their part. Numerous neurology experts testified at Allen's trial that she had significant brain damage to the frontal lobe, resulting in diminished impulse control, judgment, and mood regulation. She had sustained at least 10 traumatic brain injuries. Dr. Joseph Watt testified that her brain injuries would make it difficult for Allen to conform her conduct to cultural expectations, and that she would likely overreact to slight provocation because of the frontal lobe damage. As of February 2023, Margaret Ann Allen has spent more than 11 years, 9 months on Florida's death row. Tina LaSonia Brown, born on July 19, 1970. Tina Brown was convicted of beating 19-year-old Audrina Zimmerman with a crowbar, shocking her with a stun gun, and then setting her on fire in Brown's family home. Brown's daughter Brittany Miller, then 16, told the judge at her own trial that the plan was to fight Zimmerman, but it escalated out of control. The attack was said to be the result of a disagreement over a man. After beating her and using the stun gun, the trio put Zimmerman in the trunk of a car, drove her to a wooded area, doused her with gasoline and set her on fire. Zimmerman was able to run to a nearby home and call 911, with severe burns across 60% of her body. She died 2 weeks later. Brown, her daughter, Brittany Miller, then 16, and neighbor Heather Lee, attacked Zimmerman in Brown's Ensley home in 2010. Lee testified against Brown during the trial, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Miller was sentenced to life in prison without parole in 2013 for her role in the attack. During her trial, Miller told Circuit Judge Gary Burgosh that the initial plan had been for her to fight Zimmerman, but that attack escalated out of control. In 2012, Tina LaSonia Brown was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Audrina Zimmerman. In 2014, Brown's petition to the United States Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari was denied. Brown acknowledged that she committed the crime and expressed remorse over the event. Mitigating factors presented at trial included a rough childhood in which she was sexually abused by her father, abandoned by her mother, and kicked out of the house by her grandmother for reporting the sexual abuse. Her father ran a gang-related drug operation out of their home. She also had a long-term dependency on cocaine, which the defense asserted impacted her judgment. As of February 2023, Tina LaSonia Brown has spent more than a decade on Florida's death row. Thank you for watching Death Row.